Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is CM Alexander with the news. Things are heating up on the court today as the semifinals of Derry Public Library's Dodge Book Tournament are in full swing. For more, we're going live with sports correspondent Dr. John Hellajohn.
Thanks, CM. Today has taken a dramatic turn as the Sophocles Oedipus wrecked their competition, taking out the number one seeded team, Oscar Wilden, out, despite team captain Dorian Gray's picture-perfect performance in the early minutes of the match. For more action, stay tuned. You're listening to Derry Public Radio.
This is Derry Public Radio.
Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King book club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joshua Kahn, alongside CM Alexander.
Hello, everyone.
And Benjamin Graham.
Hey, constant readers.
And today, we are going with part 2 of our March Madness, antagonists versus protagonists. And today, we are doing the antagonist bracket. Are you guys hyped?
Yeah.
Sports.
No.
Okay, so we had a lot of good discussion last time about our protagonists, and I'm very excited to get to the finals matchup with them. But of course, you know, we have to go down the other side of the bracket. We got to go through our antagonists. And neither of you have seen what this bracket turned out to be like. So I'm really interested to see what you guys think of some of these matchups.
I'm 1,000% more excited because everyone knows King villains are so much more interesting than the heroes.
Yes. We had there's one honorable mention that did not make the bracket that had a really hard time keeping them off the bracket. The flying
Annie Wilkes so CM flips the fucking table.
It's unforgivable.
No, the flying Coke machine did not make the final bracket. It was a very close race.
Too bad.
Did Guard's alcoholism maybe?
No, it did not, sadly. All right, let's waste no time and get into our first matchup. As I told you with the protagonists, these were all a random draw for slots, and this first matchup is a humdinger. All right, in our first matchup, we have El Cuco versus Leland Gaunt.
El Cuco.
From The Outsider.
Yeah, that noise.
Sorry, I meant to say scary jizz monster is what I meant.
Thank you.
I forgot that's how you
proper
know.
Name. I feel so dumb because I completely forgot that was his name. I literally have only thought of him as a jizz monster.
It's funny because I was really proud of myself that I immediately knew who you were talking about.
So I had to fill that space.
Yeah. Only one of us can know who we're talking about at a time.
And I have to know all of them because I make the bracket. Yeah. All right, so let's start things off. Who wants to kick things off with about El Cuco?
I will.
Please tell us what you remember about this character.
A lot of people have had sightings of El Cuco. Some people claim that it's like a hyena. Others think it's some sort of animal that doesn't exist.
Are you thinking of an El Chupacabra?
Oh, whoops. No, okay, El Cuco.
El Cuco, the goat sucker.
This is, I feel like, just off the top of my head, one of the evilest villains because it murders and jizzes on and takes bites out of little kids.
I just remembered what that book was about.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime it crosses the line, anytime Stephen King makes you read about incest or child molestation or murder, it takes the top. You can't really, it makes Annie Wilkes look like a saint.
But that's something you hold true about every situation.
What?
The sky is blue, which makes you think Annie Wilkes is kind of a saint.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like me.
Yeah, my immediate thought was just like him as a monster.
Switching bodies and stuff.
Cool
that is cool.
as a monster, because, my first thought was one of the creepiest. I love any, Lovecraftian vagueness in my villains. And he has straws for eyes. I still think about that sometimes, just out of nowhere. I'll be laying in bed and be like, he had straws for eyes, and be like,
Ben,
I'm awake for a while.
The idea, God, the image I now have of you doing that is scarier than the book. I'm going to go to bed tonight thinking, Ben's thinking he has straws for eyes, and I won't be able to sleep either.
This is a terrible chain reaction we've started.
It's like
somewhere there's a listener that's going to bed going, CM's thinking, Ben's thinking, CM he has straws for eyes.
Which kind of fits into El Cuco's MO of just the domino effect of its feeding.
It's a very cool, just folklore monster.
Yeah.
But that added actual idea of what it does. It adds makes it so much worse. Because I love any cryptids. I don't know if I've ever talked about that on here, or if it's just obvious that if you love Stephen King, you love cryptids. But I fucking love cryptids, and the idea of a Stephen King book just about like a folklore monster is really cool. But the fact that he's a child murderer cannibal is rough.
Yeah. Well, and the brutality is that it doesn't stop there. What he does to the people he murders is terrible, but then just sitting back and feeding off of the grief and the persecution of whoever they framed, watching someone's whole life fall apart, watching an entire family basically commit suicide after the fact, like we get in The Outsider. It's so brutal. And when we, at the end, finally get to have dialogue with this creature, he's just kind of blasé about it.
I really wanted him to, I don't know, I wanted the evil villain like monologue that makes him more cartoonish.
It's so much scarier that he's not.
Yeah.
That he's like, this is my shit.
Yeah,
this is what I do.
I have to eat. I'm a creature. What am I going to do? Die?
I'm several red worms in a suit.
Just a couple worms stacked on top of each other wearing a trench coat.
So actually what you just said, Josh, the feeding on grief is interesting, and a great segue into his adversary in this is Leland, Gaunt, just El Cuco in a grander fashion.
Oh, he's El Cuco in a suit.
Several worms in a suit. Not literally, but it's his... He also is feeding on the pain of a town, maybe less literally. But Leland Gaunt has the added bonus in this matchup of just being cool as hell.
Let's talk about Leland Gaunt a little bit. Leland, yes, he's a mastermind. Like this is a character that never has to get his hands dirty in any way, shape, or form. And there is something about that level of being so diabolical that you have to begrudgingly respect it, I think. You know?
It's interesting, too, because I'm trying to weigh the, because you have, like, is one person suffering more important or a few people than a whole town of people? I feel like Leland maybe has more destruction, like on a grander scale. He harms more people because he's taking down entire towns, while the Jizz Monster he murders somebody and then he frames somebody, and it's the family of the child who was murdered, and it's the family and the person who is being framed for this, and that kind of can spill out too into other community members. But I feel like Leland has a higher body count, so I'm trying to weigh.
Well, and that's not knowing the time that these creatures have existed.
Assuming they started at the same time, just the way they go about
like a
things.
Race. Like they met up and they
So here's we ran into a similar problem in the last episode, at least I did, where judging just the concept of this episode is flawed.
Yeah, what are we basing it on?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's trying to judge what metric we are basing these matchups on. Is it who has the highest body count, or is it who is more powerful, or who is more evil, or who is more interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Because those are all different answers.
I think it's all of those things.
Yeah. And it's difficult because if we're basing it, I think the main thing I am going to be basing my answers on is who is more evil.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely have a definitive answer for that.
I do
think.
too.
Well, let's also keep in mind that when all's said and done, the last matchup of this bracket is
Good
best
versus evil.
Protagonist versus
Dang.
best antagonist. So that occurred to me also, like when you're thinking about how the metric you'll judge that last match by should be partially be influenced by this way. So I think we all have our answers locked in. So CM,
for sure.
I'm going to go with Leland Gaunt because the Jizz Monster, as horrible as what he is doing his approach is more like, I'm doing this to survive, which is not an excuse. It's not good, but he's not doing it purely for the, joy of being horrible. And Leland Gaunt is thoughtfully diabolical and plotting, and I think he's just more evil as an antagonist. So I'm going to go with him.
Ben?
I was going to say exactly the same thing. The things that El Cuco does are worse. I believe 100% that it's just more terrible. But El Cuco is an animal.
Mm-hmm.
It's like saying who is more evil. That lion that killed a bunch of people in Africa, or Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy, because he had the capacity to know I'm doing this on purpose.
Right.
And for that, and for how fucking cool a smoking jacket is, I have to vote for Leland Gaunt.
It's decided. My vote was based on who had the best of Elise.
I knew you were going to say that.
Going Leland Gaunt. No, I think I fully agree with you guys. I think that deciding factor is that Leland Gaunt doesn't have to do what he does.
Right.
This is
It's not for survival.
He just wants to spend his time this way, I guess.
It's just his passion.
And I also think El Cuco suffers from the fact that we don't get as much about motives and.
I'm sorry.
we get a lot of brutality.
I'm picturing Leland Gaunt just living his best life, like with these signs in his house, like live, love, laugh.
All right, it's time for our next matchup. And Ben, we're going to start with you on this one.
Right.
This next match is Rainbird versus George Stark.
Ooh.
I'm so glad it wasn't Annie versus George. Thank you. A higher power.
Jesus, this is a fucking powerhouse match.
I'm already noticing how much harder the antagonist bracket is.
Villains are always more interesting to talk about. I don't read King books for the heroes. I read it for the same reason I love Batman. He has the coolest villains.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so goddamn Rainbird. I find this so hard to talk about the characters divorced from each other. Because, especially in this instance, because like I said, they're both just fucking powerhouses. Rainbird is death incarnate. He is just a machine that the government turned into a machine. He's a man that the government turned into a machine that only cares, is single-minded, he's basically the fucking Terminator, but a person. And the lack of interest in what he does is so upsetting. That he does these things and he knows that he's doing these things and he knows they're not good things to do and he just doesn't fucking care. It is chilling. Also, the whole thing with him that he enters rooms and no one notices.
Yeah.
That's also
that's super cool.
stuck with me really
That he goes
bad.
dim.
Yeah.
Yeah. He has straws for eyes. Rainbird, what can he's fucking James Bond if James Bond was a terrifying sociopath.
Right. Well, and I think one thing that makes Rainbird so brutal is every time you think you have discovered like the depths of his depravity, he does something else that's either worse or more surprising. With the improvised moment in the blackout, that caught me completely off guard. I would never have expected a level of elegance from this character who has been so brutal and cunning. It took me by surprise.
The most terrifying thing about Rainbird for me is, and I feel like it's going to come down to this probably with all of our antagonists, the intent. When what you're doing is this terrible, awful thing, but you're not doing it for, I'm putting quotes around this, a good reason. It just makes you that much scarier. So he definitely has that going for him.
Yeah, he works for the government. And that sucks.
But technically he does, but he already has in his back pocket how to take it down. So
that's a good point.
he's working for the government as long as working for the government suits his interests.
Yeah, he's not
which
that
is
bad.
also something that's wild about Rainbird,
that's-
like the level of control he has over just his whole destiny, basically.
The complete lack of any sort of loyalty to any person, concept, nothing. He's dead.
Yeah,
He's
nothing
dead.
nothing is sacred.
You guys said something interesting that made me think about this too. The level of control he has over himself and everything in his world indicates to me that he could probably resist killing. And he is choosing to do this. He might be someone who kind of has like that compulsion, but he could control that, and he just doesn't because that's how much he does not value other people.
For sure. I do not think he is like a serial killer where he started doing this job because he wanted to kill. I think it's just killing something he's really good at.
It's a hobby, not a need.
Yeah.
Well, and in the way he's kind of the embodiment of that saying of the only two can keep a secret if one of them is dead, because we see him like when he shows up in that dude's room and he's like, tell me everything you know about this project, and then kills the guy. Because and imagine how many times he's done things like that over his career, where killing people in some points is just an assurance to make sure nobody knows that he knows this.
It's like getting out a new toothbrush.
Yeah.
Not anything that
I've got to
you
go
think
murder
about
my old toothbrush.
Yeah.
Because somebody might tell him about my teeth. All right, let's jump over to George Stark. George Stark is amazing. Like George Stark is a thrill ride of a villain. Like if Rainbird is a museum and George Stark is an amusement park.
That is a fascinating. I could go the rest of the episode unpacking.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's astute. I love that.
It's the amount of creativity, the amount of flair, he can completely disregard most of the rules and logic because he thinks 1 or 2 steps ahead and he isn't real. That's also gambling with your existence when you don't actually exist. Pretty easy to do.
I'm fascinated by George Stark's motivation because I think in some ways that gives him an edge because he is motivated by his need and drive to survive. And I think that might in some ways, antagonist-wise, just give him a leg up. There's a lot at stake for him, more so than for Rainbird. And the other thing, like you guys just said, George is fun and I love him. I would hang out with him even though I knew it was a terrible idea. I would go nowhere near Rainbird.
This is why I said I find it so hard to divorce these two from talking about them in contrast to each other. Because I see them as so similar. George Stark is equally driven. They both have this singular focus on their goal. If either of these two want you dead, you are dead. And so, like, trying to, I know we spent 3 minutes just a little bit ago talking about how judging them by how evil they are makes the most sense. But these two, it's who wins in a fight.
I would watch the fuck out of that fight.
Exactly.
Jesus.
It would be fascinating because they're just both unstoppable. They are, it is the unstoppable force, unmovable object. How could either of them win? Which, honestly, in this fan fiction that I'm writing right now in my brain, they don't. They team up.
It's a buddy cop movie.
And they become the fucking Vega brothers and go around doing murders on
Hell yeah.
people.
Ben, when you're done with that book, can you write my George Stark, Annie Wilkes love story?
I actually already have that in a notebook.
Good.
Buried in my backyard. It's too unpleasant. No one can read it.
It's too unpleasant and horny.
It uses the words proud flesh in a number of contexts.
Oh. Wow. So who would win in this fight?
Well, all right. So what I was going to ask you guys this question, but I'm just going to answer it myself. And if you guys want to add into it, you can. Because that's how I've decided I want to do this. I thought if somebody were to ask me to think of a George Stark scene and think of a Rainbird scene, what scenes would immediately come to mind? And for Rainbird, it was the improvised scene of pretending to be scared of the storm and all of that, like, emotionally terrifying manipulation. When I think George Stark, I think, well, he pushed a dude's a thumbtack through someone's tongue into a wall, cut their dick off, put it in their mouth, and sliced the fuck out of them, and wrote in blood all over their apartment. It's just like,
yep, that all happened.
Yeah, that's when I think of them at a knee-jerk response. Do you guys have different thoughts of, like, if you conjure these characters, the first scene you think of?
I don't even think of a scene for Rainbird. Rainbird is such a blank slate of a character. I think of Rainbird and I just think of the feeling of just void. If that makes sense.
Yes, because I feel the exact same way. And I was just thinking, I actually feel that way about both of them, but slightly different. So for George Stark, I think of just sort of everything about him, just his persona, that feeling he has about him that he gives me when I read that story. And when I think of Rainbird, in my head, it's almost like he's described when he's walking into a room. It's like this dim space in my head for him.
Okay, here's what I think of. George Stark is you exit a hotel elevator into a hallway covered in blood.
Mm-hmm.
Rainbird is you exit a hotel elevator, you are expecting to walk into a room full of blood, and there's just a guy staring at you.
Both very different kinds of unnerving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, I think we've said all we need to say. Ben, we're gonna go to you first.
We've said a lot, and I have not come any closer. At the end of the day, I think I just have to choose which character I think is more interesting as a character. And as fun as George Stark is, because he is objectively a much more fun villain, he gets to do a lot of cool, fucking messy stuff. And he melts and gets eaten by birds at the end. Great. But as a character that I want to learn more about, that I would read a Rainbird prequel that, like, just is about how fucked up this dude is. I have to choose Rainbird.
Oh, this is real hard. God, Rainbird is so fucking evil and so great. And I think we talked about it in the Firestarter episodes that we want that. I would read so many stories about Rainbird shit. But I think George Stark it's the overly dramatic murders that really we know how much I love a high body count.
It is very 80s movie.
Yeah.
80s action movie death count. Yeah.
It is the way that the variety in which he dispatches of people, and he doesn't, you can feel the entertainment value he's getting from it and how much fun he's having kind of staging it for people to find. And that just level of mania makes him so interesting to me and so great to read about. So I'm going to go with George Stark.
You know, it's weird. I feel like I'm going to end up making all my judgments based on how much they enjoy their job. Because as you were talking, I realized, like, because I'm going to have to go with George because he's so fucking cool and fun. But it's sort of the same thing with Leland Gaunt. You know, if you could just kind of change that a little bit. And yeah, he really takes pleasure in what he's doing. And it means something to him. It's not for survival. And George Stark also, you know, puts a lot of thought into the presentation and delivery system.
He's a showman.
He is.
He is. And I guess he got me.
He beat a man to death with his own arm.
That's did do that. I forgot.
That's pretty great.
Poor Homer.
Poor Homer.
Before we move on, I got to say, that is the right answer. If I know I voted against it, but in reality,
had you voted George Stark, I think I might have voted Rainbird just so that Rainbird could get the nod he deserves in this category. I was so on the fence.
He just deserved the honorable mention.
He
He's
really
a
did.
Good villain.
Yeah,
he deserved it not being unanimous. All right, up next, Kurt Barlow versus Randall Flagg.
Oh, that's easy. Sorry, it's your turn.
No, when I first drew this, I thought, yeah, that's all right. What a mismatch because Randall Flagg is Randall Flagg.
Oh, you gonna change our minds?
But I went back to all the things that I did not enjoy about Salem's Lot. But the thing that I enjoyed the most is Kurt Barlow, because the fact that we get so little of him makes him so terrifying. And we discussed in those episodes, like, imagine the hell that Barlow has laid across this planet since he was created. And I can't think of a single thing Randall Flagg has done that stands up to the Barlow-Callahan face-off. That face-off is so fucking intense. Not only busting in and crushing Mark Petrie's parents' skulls together and smashing them into one another, but just placing his hand on the cross and folding it in was one of the most amazing scenes I have ever read. And if Salem's Lot was not the end of Barlow's story, Barlow could have had many other books before and after. And I can just imagine if he's able to do that to a holy man of the cloth, what other unspeakable things would this monster be capable of if his plan had worked and he'd had that whole town to himself? And I just think there's so much to think about there. And that's what I think about when I think about Kurt Barlow.
I obviously, I had the same thought that CM had immediately. And I'm sure that every single listener had immediately of, oh, why even talk about this? But that is such an interesting point. That one scene alone, hands down the best scene in the entire book, makes the entire book, elevates it so much. The fact that the entire point of The Stand is the ultimate showdown of good versus evil is completely shown up by this one chapter, this one page. Because you're right, that showdown between of Barlow completely destroying Callahan, ruining another man's faith. Well, he ruined Mark Petrie's dad's face.
Oh,
but completely destroying Callahan's faith is so much more powerful than two tribes staring at each other through the mountains. I do love a suave villain. The scene where he shows up in the dump that he's just like a cool Italian guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the downside, when you said Richard Barlow, and this happens every time, I never remember whether that's the vampire or his minion.
Yeah, I have that same
Yes.
problem.
I
Straker is the
never
person.
remember whether Barlow or Straker is the main guy.
Yeah.
Which he doesn't have the name recognition.
That is true.
Well, and Straker was such a cool character in his own right that it does kind of steal the limelight away from Barlow as the villain, too.
Yeah.
Which, for me, kind of detracts a little bit. Although I will say I tend to have a soft spot in my heart for vampires just in general. Like, they can just be awful, like Twilight-style vampires. I will forgive it. I love vampire stuff. I do have difficulty separating the book Barlow from the movie Barlow.
Which you absolutely should.
Good.
Every time you
100%.
say Barlow, I don't even know if this happened in the movie, but it's not, it's an image and a sound. And the sound is bleh. And it just kills all tension.
And you imagine his teeth wiggling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do appreciate what you guys are talking about with that scene with Father Callahan, because that is so cool. I just wish that there was more of that.
All right, let's talk about Flagg. Let's God. What can you say? We also, since we're covering what we've read, we have
I was
two
gonna say,
iterations
which
of
iteration?
Flagg
Yeah.
that we can draw from. It's hard to argue when we talked about Barlow's history and the hell he's laid in the world. Flagg has several worlds that he has had the chance to lay waste to. So, I mean, if you go body count, nobody has a higher body count than Flagg, I bet. Especially if you make him responsible for the super flu. But, yeah, I mean, like, what can you say about a dude who can be anywhere at any time, knows your deepest, darkest secrets, the chasing Franny with the coat hanger. Like, it's such a simple but horrifying sequence. The scene I always think about when I think Randall Flagg, though, is a weird one. It's the like second scene when he sits out on that guy's chest.
I literally was thinking of that exact same
That's
scene.
amazing.
Yeah, that scene is unforgettable.
It's
love that
so
scene.
small, and literally I remembered that scene from when I read it in the 7th grade, of just the casual, gleeful cruelty of it is so cool. He's cool.
Although
He is
I have to
cool.
agree with Josh, though. Like, my favorite Flagg scene is, even though that one's really cool, it's the Franny dream one where he's just lounging half naked up against a tree in the forest.
Okay,
We are
talking about-
I knew it.
we are talking about two
You-
different Randall
you
Flaggs.
almost had me. You had me for so long.
Speak on that, CM.
So, Alexander Skarsgård. No. The timelessness of him is kind of cool because we have a similar thing with Barlow. I threw myself off with my own joke. I can't remember. Do you wanna
Honestly,
talk-
that's a good enough.
Yeah, let's just leave it at that.
Here's my thing about Flagg. We have exclusively been talking about The Stand. That's not all. We're
Correct.
talking about Randall Flagg. If we're talking about Randall Flagg, we are talking about Flagg the Magician. We are arguably talking about Walter O'Dim.
Also, possibly, this is what I remembered what I was saying now.
Yeah.
Also, possibly Carrie's dad. We have ourselves shoehorned this character into so many books
In
that
the books that he's not in.
right. Like, I think we could make a fair argument, but
Yeah.
he's such a cool villain in that he has, you just think of him that way. You think of him on this really huge grand scale. Barlow is just one book.
It's Flagg is the second, first most arguably most important villain in the multiverse. You just can't compete. You can't.
I would argue there is a point of contention that you could make. Think of how much Randall Flagg we have gotten over the course of everything, even counting all the things that we haven't covered on the show, but we have individually read. Now, how many times has Randall Flagg fucked up? How bad is Flagg at what he does? For somebody who can read people's minds, can teleport pretty much anywhere, the dude has fucked up nearly every opportunity he has ever had.
True.
He had Roland at his mercy at the end of the first book. Spoilers.
But he's still going. Barlow fucked up and died.
He it only took the one time.
Yeah, here's the thing. Flagg has fucked up and died in incredibly stupid ways at least twice. Just off the top of my head,
true.
He has two of the dumbest deaths in King's Ovra. Like, I don't want to spoil anything, but book 6 or book 7, does it happen in? Either way, it's sad.
It's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing.
But because I think that Flagg suffers from the downfall of, or I guess I shouldn't even call it the downfall because it's the reason I picked George Stark. He suffers from the same, just really needing to flourish.
Yeah.
But the problem is that Flagg has such a grander stage that his fuck ups are so much worse.
He takes it too far.
He
That's
does.
a good point.
His flair for the dramatic gets him, sets himself up for failure. His pride is the reason he will never succeed in killing the whole world or taking over the whole world, whatever his fancy happens to be in whatever plane he's currently in. Meanwhile, Barlow, again, I know I talked about this scene a lot, but just to go back to it one more time, he destroys Father Callahan's faith the first time he meets him. He doesn't have the omniscience to read Callahan's mind and know his whole history. He hasn't teleported around watching him do all these things. He shows up and breaks this dude down in 6 minutes.
And it's also so personal.
Yes.
Everything Flagg does, like you said, it's a grand stage. Everything he does is the end of the world, the end of existence. It is all so over the top. But Barlow is just, he could show up.
I don't know. Eyes of the Dragon Flagg, he just wants to rule the kingdom. He just wants to control the king.
He wants to not catch an arrow through the eye. And he fucked that plan up.
Who are you guys voting for?
Are we ready to vote? I go first. I feel like I've made my stance very, very
Have
clear.
you made your stand?
I've taken my stand, and I'm voting for, obviously, Randall Flagg.
Yeah.
CM?
Thank you. Yeah, Randall Flagg.
Randall Flagg.
Jeez, Josh.
I really had you
It
for a
was
second.
that was a great discussion. I enjoyed that. But duh. Are you kidding me? Now, I'm not saying that Randall Flagg is going to just stomp everyone on this bracket.
Yeah,
but
Annie's clearly going to win.
in that matchup, like, come on.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you guys bought into my argument that I was not sure if it was
It's a good argument.
I was ready to be like, I am baffled.
All right, and it's time for our final matchup. And CM, we're going to go to you first. This final matchup, Annie Wilkes versus Norman Daniels.
Oof.
Oh, wow.
Oof.
Oh.
I saw that matchup.
Oh, no.
And I was like, these are, okay, bad, kind of easy. Last one, I was like, fuck me, man. CM, I'll let you take your pick. Who do you want to start with? Do you want to start talking with Annie or Norman?
I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it anymore.
That's it for this episode of Derry Public Radio.
Okay, it's going to be, I'm going to try to just pick one because I want to talk about them both so hard.
Well, once we talk about them, once we all talk about them once, then we can talk about them all together.
Let's start with Norman so I can just gather myself for Annie. I have a complicated relationship.
Do it for Annie.
Norman Daniels is an awful monster. And what kind of makes him worse in a way than George, than Leland Gaunt, than Randall Flagg, which is funny because he's paired up with Annie and this is her thing too. He is just a person. He does not have superpowers. There's nothing, he's not otherworldly. There's nothing special about him. He's just a terrible, awful human being. That is scarier than a monster because it feels so real. And he reflects a lot of actual people like that who are also terrible. And you can't escape into a fantasy world with this fun villain. He is not enjoyable because there are men like that who treat women that way. I don't even know what else to say about him.
Well, something that fascinates me about Norman is he's brutal, he's violent, he's terrible. And again, once you think they can't get any worse, like he's a monster, but the things he does once he has that bull mask, when he places that mask on, he doesn't transform it in any way, but he becomes even more of a monster. There's a point deep enough in Norman that even he had to have permission to hide from himself and let out, and that mask gives him that permission.
And it's interesting, I just made this argument that he's a person, not a monster, but we actually do get him becoming a monster. He becomes the bull when they enter the painting. And so I'm trying to think of him now too in terms of had that version of him continued,
Arguably, Norman in the painting is least bad Norman.
He's more operating on like instinct and
I guess. And I mean,
I don't know. He still seems to have so much agency that
my argument, I guess, is that is in the final chase and he doesn't have the opportunity to do more violent things to people. Like he has done all of his violence and his body counts leading up to this point. And for when he is in the painting, he doesn't really
but he'd bust out of there. He wouldn't even try to take the mask off. He would just be content being that thing.
If he could escape the painting and be that monster,
he would stay that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Google 40% of cops. 1312, fuck this guy. What about Annie?
Ben, what do you think about Annie?
Annie, it's awesome. This is going to be a case of it's very hard for me to divorce the book from the movie, obviously, because Kathy Bates is a goddamn national treasure.
Yeah.
It says something that she is just like CM said about Norman. She's just a woman. She's just a human being. And I put her on the same level of iconic villain as Randall Flagg. Like the fact that I almost want to say, like, what is there to say? It's Annie Wilkes. The tension and also just to not just go off about how fucking good the book is, the writing, the slow dread, the escalation. It's a good book.
It's a great book. The thing that makes Annie so scary is the flip. She is completely nice. You're having a great conversation. You're hanging out. You make a joke, barely a joke. She is the most offended, hurt human being that has ever existed, and you will pay for this transgression. And there's no backpedaling it. Like you have no idea where the line is, but you're gonna cross it.
Annie Wilkes is abusive in a different way. She's more psychologically manipulative with her abuse, not even intentionally, but just because she is so mentally unstable. She's so damaged. And also, I hate to talk bad about my girl Annie, but she kills babies.
She did kill a lot of babies.
She is... So can I just kind of talk about the comparison a little bit?
Yeah.
So I think about Norman, and there were more people who suffered his wrath, obviously, but his main focus, unfortunately, was Rosie, and this is much more of an intimate feeling of somebody doing something wrong and bad. And so it's easier to connect with that when it's like one person it's impacting. When it's a lot more people, you kind of lose that human connection and it doesn't seem as egregious. But really thinking about, okay, Norman terrorized his wife, which is horrible and unforgivable. He got rid of anybody who got in his way, and he probably would have continued to do more terrible things. Annie's just killing so many people. And there is that very intimate part of it when it comes to her and Paul, too. So it's even scarier that she can be more of this like mass killer, the serial killer, but also we still get that very connected piece of it where it's just these two people. Annie Wilkes is more frightening to me for those reasons.
She runs over a guy's head with a lawnmower.
Fuck, I forgot about that.
I mean,
shit.
That's fucking brutal.
And there's still something about her, this very tiny sympathetic thread. It's weird, and it makes me feel uncomfortable that I feel that, and I like being challenged in that way.
It's Norman is so repellent and so evil and so obviously like has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. It's easy to think of him as kind of a one-dimensional villain. He is just a force that is, coming. He is in the distance and he is very scary, but he's less human than Annie, who we see is also this force of nature, but also because she has this instability, we see her being just the person that she is.
We see what she could be.
We see the possibility of what she could have been.
We see hope in Annie, which is weird.
And it's so much worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing that I said with El Cuco and Leland Gaunt, where objectively the things that Norman does are worse. I do believe that he is, if we're talking about who's the worst person, Norman wins hands down. But who is the better character? Who is the better villain? I think it's a lot clearer.
See, I think the amount of hope that we see, CM argued that Annie belonged in the protagonist category.
I might have told Josh to put her in that category.
Right,
off mic.
We talk about it all the time, about Annie Wilkes being the hero and all that. But at the same time, it's not a complete joke. And to me, that hurts her in the best antagonist category, that she arguably is not always a brutal antagonist, that she is, she's just mentally ill and kind of a sociopath. That like her angel of mercy stuff, killing all these people, and the only reason that she treats Paul Sheldon the way she does is because she's his number one fan and she needs that book out of him. Like, it's entirely selfish motivations for her. But yeah, there are times where we see, like, had she gotten help, had she been like given medication and therapy and stuff, there's a chance she could have been just all right. Norman leaves a man bitten to death, tied up in his apartment. He bit his penis off.
He's also a jizz monster.
He's also kind of a jizz monster. The brutality.
They call him an excreter.
Oh, God. I hate King a little bit for that.
No, I think that's a
no,
real
it's a real
term.
thing. It's a real
bad.
thing. But the context in which I learned it will forever haunt me.
Yeah.
Although Norman and Annie both held their quote unquote loved ones prisoners for a very long time.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of parallels there, which I hate to say.
What I would have loved, fight scene between Annie and Gert. I would have loved to see that battle go down.
Just the names they would be calling each other.
But I think, and again, this is a weird. I find something that when it comes to antagonists, when things don't go their way, how it's handled really impacts how you think about the character.
Yeah.
Whereas Norman is so evil. When Gert kicks the shit out of him and pees on him, it's the greatest fucking victory. I like, you savor every moment of her beating the shit out of him.
But you have the same feeling when Paul's stuffing burning paper in
Do
Annie's
you?
mouth. Oh.
I mean, yes, that is how you feel.
But I guess, yes, yeah, the end of Annie is definitely brutal. It's not as, I don't think it didn't feel as satisfying. And it may be because that's the end. Yeah. Whereas this ass kicking happens in the middle of the book and you're like, the fuck happens now? And maybe that colors it a little bit. Because when Paul does it, it's the, heroic, this is the, I'm getting to safety, but then to find out that she crawled halfway to the barn afterwards. It's like great.
He's a rock.
Yeah.
Tank.
It's so brutal. And so, yeah, I think the severity for me, it's a big game changer because Annie is so sympathetic, whereas Norman is a monster.
So who gets to vote?
CM goes first.
You make a very compelling argument, Josh, for Norman being a better antagonist just because the things he does are so egregious. Not just because I love Annie, I have to give it to Annie though, just for the sheer, she killed so many people and she had that scrapbook. And if it was just Paul, Paul and the one before him, if it was just more things like that, she wouldn't seem as big of this bad to me. But because she has this incredible history of destruction behind her wherever she goes, and Norman's starts, and I know there's more before that, but his is more so related to Rosie finally escaping him and his pursuit of her. Annie is, to me, more chaotic because it's just like, wow, you don't know if you're safe. She's just like, what's the rhyme or reason? She's just killing these sick people, and sometimes they're not even that sick. Norman, stay out of his way and you're safe. Don't be involved with his shit. So that makes Annie more of a threat to me.
Ben?
Here's how I'm thinking about this, because like we've said, there's really a weird amount of parallels between the two of them. Their methods and their methods and the madness. The only way I can make a decision between the two of them is to think of them as the movie Silence of the Lambs versus the movie Funny Games.
All right, yeah.
They are both about serial killers. They're both very good, in my opinion. But I would watch Silence of the Lambs again. You know what I mean? Annie Wilkes is, and the book Misery as a whole is so good. Every single aspect is just, it sucks you in and is gripping, well told, and Annie is just like a quintessential King villain, and I will return to that book over and over again. Rose Matter and Norman is a terrifying villain, and he is every bit as awful, and like I said, what he does is worse, but it's too real. It is too uncomfortable. I read the book once and it is very good. And if I ever decide to go back and reread Rose Matter, I think it will be a struggle because it's a difficult read. And so for that reason, I have to vote for Annie Wilkes.
I thought you were going to say Norman, because it kind of what you were saying made it seem like he would be a better villain because you can't even revisit him again.
That's one way to look at it. This one is so close that it could have gone either way. Mm-hmm. I just, more or less, I'm saying I really love Annie the book Misery. It's one of my favorites, and
who knew that it would be a popularity contest with our antagonist?
You're right.
As far as my vote, I'm actually also going Annie Wilkes.
Really?
The reason being, this is what the deciding factor came down to me. And with Rose Matter and with Norman, there are, that when Norman enters the scene, someone is going to die. You are on the edge of your seat. Yes, but there are plenty of times in Rose Matter where I felt safe. There is not a single chapter of Misery that I ever felt comfortable or safe the entire time I read it. And to me, that just it pushes Annie Wilkes over the edge. Like, yes, she had some sympathetic tendencies, but that only made those sharp turns scarier. So we have Annie Wilkes moving on.
Yay!
All right.
Sorry, I'm happy. I thought it was going to be Norman. I thought
it was never really a choice in my head.
All right. Before we go, we only have one more episode left, and we are going to get down to our winner. So before we go, I'm going to recap what the matchups for next episode are going to be. We will have Alan Pangborn versus Charlie McGee, Rose McClendon versus Andy Dufresne, Leland Gaunt versus George Stark.
No.
Randall Flagg versus Annie Wilkes.
No. I won't be here. I can't.
That's a fucking lineup.
There's some insane battles ahead, and I cannot wait to get to this episode.
I need our listeners to weigh in. This is so hard.
That's it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. Join us for our next episode where we will crown the winner of our antagonist versus protagonist bracket. For CM Alexander and Benjamin Graham, I'm Joshua Kahn, reminding you, what do I usually say?
Stay brackets.
Nailed it.
Hey everyone, CM Alexander here. Thank you so much for listening to March Madness Part 2. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, please find us on social media at Derry Public Radio or send us an email with your brackets at derrypublicradio@gmail.com. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.